Hi everybody, it is April and I am in my craft room, and today we're going to do something we haven't done in a while. We're going to make a 3-yard quilt. So I am thrilled to be here and be a part of the celebration of the sewing channel. She's asked me to donate a quilt to give away on her channel in her celebration. I'm really excited. I watch her channel. I think she has some awesome ideas. If you haven't checked out the sewing channel, please do so. And this is the tutorial. Oliver has even joined in for the celebration. This is the tutorial on how I made the quilt for her anniversary. The quilt that we are going to be making is called Sweet Times, and it comes from the Easy Peasy book by Fabric Cafe. These quilts, when I go back to them, are so much fun to make. I've gotten away from them. I've been doing my own kind of patterns, on the go, quick patterns. And these are just as quick, and if you have 3 yards of coordinating fabric in your stash, you can make one of these. The directions are pretty straightforward, and if you have problems following directions like I do, you can watch one of my tutorials on how to make them and get a visual representation of how to put the pattern together. And usually you can get some tips on how to avoid some traps that you might fall into. And I'm usually, falling, so I am using my falling to help you avoid yours. Let me show you the pattern up close. Gracie has also joined in to say happy anniversary. She's thrilled. Yeah, you thrilled? Fabric 1, which is our focus fabric, is by Northcott. Fabric 2 is QT Fabrics. I could have that in every single one of my quilts. Love that. Fabric 3 is Joann's. I have taken the liberty of cutting my fabric. I can't share with you what the lengths are that I'm cutting, or the widths, or the dimensions, or I can't even think of the word to use. If you want to make this quilt, Easy Peasy is available. I'll put a link below, and they're very economically priced. My first cut was Fabric 1, and the great thing about this pattern is Fabric 1, all the cuts are the same. Fabric 2, all the cuts are the same. So that makes it really quick because you don't have to look back and forth. You know what you're going to cut this. For the most part, Fabric 3, the cuts are the same. There are 2 different cuts. So you have your cut to go with your blocks, and then you have your cut, which is going to be your border. The instructions start with taking Fabric 1 and sewing Fabric 2 on either side of it. And I have also taken Fabric 1 and put Fabric 3 on either side. You end up with 3 strips of Fabric 1. You cut one of the strips of Fabric 1 in half, and then you put Fabric 2 on either side of Fabric 1 on the half strip, and on either side of Fabric 1 on the full strip. And then you do the same thing with Fabric 3. You put it on either side of Fabric 1 on the half strip, and on either side of Fabric 1 on the full strip. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut our strips of fabric into blocks. I've already cut the first set of blocks. I will continue to cut the strips until I have 6 of each block. So I will have 6 of the Fabric 1 and Fabric 3, and 6 of the Fabric 1 and Fabric 2. So here I have 6 blocks of each of my patterns. This right here tells me that I could use panels in these blocks. This would be perfect for a panel quilt, and don't you think I won't be doing that sometime soon. Now the next step is to take the fabric that is on the outside of your fabric 1, so in this case it would be fabric 2, and put it on either side of the block and trim once you've put it there. You can also do chain piecing. So you can start with your block attached to your fabric, attach that fabric to fabric, in this case 3, set your next block right after that, as long as your fabric is long enough, and keep on sewing. So here are my blocks since I added the sides. This is fabric 1 and fabric 2. This is fabric 1 with fabric 3. I have also started sewing the rows, and let's go out at the design wall and have a look at that. Here you can see how I have joined these blocks together, and here I have 2 of the rows of blocks, and I put the fabric 2 along the sides just so you can see how these blocks with the fabric 2 around them will look like they're floating once this all comes together. So let me finish sewing my rows and putting all my blocks together, and then I'll come back. Just a little pointer. I have put my blocks together in such a way that there are no seams to join between the 2 blocks. So here is a seam and here is a seam, and I don't have to worry about lining it up. Had I turned the red block this way, then I would have had to match seams here. However, it saves you from matching seams on your rows, but when you put your rows together, you will have seams to match there. Now I'm going to be adding the border of fabric 2 to the edge of my blocks. And it looks like the width of fabric here is just a hair shy of being long enough once I add this border and this border. However, I did not take into account that there is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that's a 1/2 inch, and it may just work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of the strips and put them together just like I did here, and I will start on the side. Then whatever's left over from this I may use at the top, just depending on how it turns out. So you can see I have added my first border to my quilt. What I like to do when adding a border to make it easier to sew, because you know your quilt is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I like to fold over the front to where there's a little room left. This is a pretty thin border, so I don't need to leave a lot of room, and fold it over again. That way, when you are feeding this through your machine, you have control of this part of your quilt. It's not hanging off the edge of the table. Just a little tip. When it's questionable as to whether or not your border is going to require more than the width of your fabric, what I suggest is this. Take a small leftover piece of one of your borders, add it to a full-size strip, and then start with your shorter piece. Because if you start with your longer piece, which is, you know, your width of fabric piece, there's a possibility that you will only need maybe an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch of the smaller piece, because that's how close it is in size to your width of fabric. But it doesn't, to me, it's not as pleasing to the eye if you've got just this little bitty strip of fabric at the very end. It just looks better. Not to say you can't do it. I have done it before. It just looks better if you end without a seam close to the edge of your quilt. Then your seam will be somewhere in the middle and not quite as noticeable. My quilt top is complete. Actually, my whole quilt is complete. After broken thread, I broke my Bernina Q16. I struggled with trying to get the thread to work with different machines. I worked on my Janome, on my Juki, but through perseverance, this quilt is done. And I think it's beautiful. I am really pleased with the way that it turned out. I hope whoever gets this quilt thinks it's as pretty as I do and gets lots and lots of enjoyment out of it. Happy anniversary to the sewing channel, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to celebrate with you. Have a great day, eat some chocolate, and be kind to everyone. Until next time, bye. Let me show you the, Oliver, can you help me out here? Let me share with you, let me stand still first before I share with you, fabric. If you want to make these quilts, if you want to make this quilt, 3, that is wrong. Depending on your size of the border, the thin border, so I don't leave. When you have a fabric border, what other kind of border would there be? Bleh.